A famous study by MIT Technology Review revealed that only 0.5% of all data is ever analyzed. Imagine the enormity of data that exists today, particularly in the oil and gas sector. Industry 4.0 brings unparalleled technology at the forefront, and big data in oil and gas is an integral part of the ongoing digital disruption. Hello and welcome. I'm Garima, and joining me on the Dais today is Dr. Satyam Priyadarshy, Technology Fellow and Chief Data Scientist at Halliburton. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
Thank you very much, Garima, for inviting me.
It's a pleasure, sir. So let's begin with your unique inspiration behind joining the oil and gas industry, because everyone has this unique why behind why they're part of the oil and gas industry. What has been your motivation?
Interesting question. And I think you opened up with a statement saying some studies said that 5% of data is being used. I've been in this data space for quite some time in many industries. Most of my learnings of how to monetize data came when I used to work for AOL, America Online, the pioneer of internet, right? And generated huge amounts of data and monetized it, right? And then second is like I've looked around and people were talking, oh my God, oil and gas industry has a lot of data. Healthcare has a lot of data. So it's some experience in computational drug discovery. So I knew a little bit about that industry. And then one day I used to work for another public company in the consumer space. And one day I got a call from a recruiter saying oil and gas industry is looking for someone with their expertise. And then I said, okay. And they said, and you know how they promised that we have lots of data, as you said, but didn't know that 5% was a number then. Of course, I learned very quickly. But then also I grew up in, I'm a child of ONGC, right? So I knew a little bit about oil and gas industry. So I said, maybe it's a time for me to go back to full circle, right? And go and play in oil and gas industry. So that's how I ended up coming to oil and gas industry. Certainly, they do have, I would say, significant amount of data. Whether they use 5%, 1%, there is a study from McKinsey, CNBC. I think I was part of that discussion long time, 2014, saying only 1% of data is being used. But that 1% was done in the context of IoT sensors in 2014, 15. So, this, how much data is used, is that of value? Or is it the value from the data that is important?
True, very
right. Whether we use 100%, whether you use 1%, question is how are we generating value and transforming the industry or the company or the business or the unit? That is more important. That's why I like to call it time to value from the data.
True, very true.
Right? And that is more critical than percent of data.
Very true.
And so when they called, I just, okay, fine, let me go and see for a couple of years and see what we can do in this industry. And it's been a wonderful ride, actually.
Absolutely, sir. So please tell us a bit about your time at Halliburton and your professional experience before joining Halliburton as well.
Right. So before joining Halliburton, my PhD is from IIT Bombay in theoretical chemistry or quantum chemistry. Some people may not relate quantum chemistry as chemistry, so it's like quantum physics for those who are confused. And then I've been a researcher in Sydney, University of Pittsburgh, where I became an assistant professor in computational chemistry. That's where I actually really learned how to generate huge amounts of data for biophysical problems. And then, of course, you have to interpret them, right? You can't, right. It's not a tool. It's not a graph, right? It's not a histogram, right, like in the business world. So you have very complex data looking at, say, for example, a site for a drug interaction, so to say. And visualization was a big component of it. And that's how I set up the first R&D lab for computational chemistry and a teaching lab there at University of Pittsburgh. And then I moved on to Rutgers to run for a short time what is called the protein data bank, which is now one of the critical pieces of the puzzle, right, in the bioinformatics area, genomics and all. So this is I'm talking about 99.
Okay.
That's when I needed something, and I called a friend, previous director of that role, to ask for something, and he said, "Oh, come to this company called AOL." I said, "What is AOL?" And he said, "Oh, you will get 10,000 servers rather than 400." Right? You know how it is. You get the next shiny tool, and that's how I ended up at AOL in the operation side of it, and what people call social media. I can actually coin the term now, social media 0.9, because we had the similar things then,
Right.
right? And but it was inside a walled garden, but lots of data was generated. That's where I built a lot of analysis tools. I That time the term data science was not known. I I used to call it science on the data, and that's what I was doing to monetize, reduce the cost, right, and provide services. So that's where I grew my career basically, and went to become from a individual contributor to become the head of AOL Research Lab, doing AI ML in 2005. And then after a couple of years, I moved on to become an executive at Network Solutions, which is the first domain name company. And then from there, I moved on to another consumer space company called Axiom Corporation. And in between, I did some startups, some executive level coaching, training, strategy, and and then in 2014, I came to Halliburton.
Wonderful.
Well, the charter was very clear, right? Big data was a talk of the town. Very few people knew. Halliburton was forward thinking, I would say, because they hired me from outside the industry. Um, and we set up the first industry's first big data and data science center of excellence. And 2014, that too, that if you remember 2014, there was a downturn going
Yes.
on.
Yes.
Uh, so it was difficult, but we managed sail through it and built a global practice in it. Today we have people in Houston, people in India, in Bangalore, and some other countries, and we are engaged with multiple of our partners. Because Halliburton's goal has been to collaborate and engineer solutions, right? And digital or the data becomes a core piece of it,
Right.
right? So we still help maximize the asset value for them by leveraging the data and digital assets as well. And that's our core business. Uh, and building this team from scratch was a great experience. I think at one point we had the highest number in percentage terms of even women data scientists in the COE. But that our organization grows, so percentage goes up and down. But we had a lot of, and the best part is that most of the data scientists are not purely from oil and gas. They come from different background, right?
Right.
For example, mine is in quantum chemistry and an MBA. We have a person, she has like atomic physics slash astrophysics kind of. Another person is chemical engineer, a mathematics PhD. So if you think of it, working in an oil and gas from multiple different sectors is a unique experience. And
Definitely.
we help. The other advantage that with Halliburton is that we are 100-year-old company with domain experience. So combining the modern digital data aspect with the knowledge of the domain, that mix is the most powerful mix, and that's why we've been helping our partners with that. Certainly, we are on our growth path in this space. And since you're sitting in India, we will be hiring in India even though it's a downturn,
Yes. Definitely.
because activities continue to grow in this space. Especially, I think cloud technologies has become very important. Um, the digital aspects, like across the life cycle. If you think of it, design thinking is a key component of it. Of
Right.
course, people want to use the term artificial intelligence, machine learning interchangeably,
Right.
but that's one way of like creating value from the data. That's important. But foundation of AI ML is required, right? So the programming part is needed. So if you look at it, there are multiple people as skill sets are needed.
Right.
Right, and the future is in computer vision, augmented reality, virtual reality. I call it immersive reality. Um, so certainly we are looking towards those areas.
Absolutely, sir. And sir, now talking about the role of a data scientist in the oil and gas industry, if you had to describe it to the younger generation who are seeking a career in the industry, how would you explain them?
So think of a data scientist as a person who can work with a domain expert and help them create value from the data by looking at things that they were not able to look at it before. I use a term in my definition. I call it hidden inefficiencies. Right. So when you actually look at data, connect the data sets that were not possible to connect before, there are patterns that will emerge out of the data, and then help interpret that pattern with along with the domain experts or subject matter experts, because they couldn't generate that pattern in before.
Right.
Right, because if you're looking at historical data, there are a lot of things hidden in them, and then working together to actually reduce the cost, increase the efficiency. Right, when it comes to revenue, of course you can always go there to revenue side as well, but always help to create more economic value, or the economic impact. And that's the role of a data scientist.
Okay.
Right, I'm not going to say, oh, data scientist is the person who is just coding.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not data scientists in my sense. Right, if you don't understand the business, and if you look at it, right, large number of people are not really writing code per se. Right, all libraries are available.
Right.
Correct. So
Right.
you can put pieces of library together, you might get a chart, you might get a graph, and but if you can't help interpret it, then what kind of data scientist are you?
Yes, definitely.
Right. And sometimes for people, even it's especially younger generation, they should know that a chart could be a simple histogram or could be a very complex landscape.
Right.
Goal is to interpret in the right context, right? In the right for the right reasons,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to answer a question.
Yes.
That,
Yes.
that 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 is the most important part of being a data scientist. Sometimes people will challenge you. All right, as a data scientist will find patterns which will be quite challenging to a domain person. They will say this can never happen, but the data never lies, right? Unless the data is modified by human beings uh, for various reasons, but the raw data never lies. There is a story behind it,
Mm-hmm.
and 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 the goal is data scientist job is to just show it, right? I don't know if you remember, last year there was a story in the Guardian, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was somebody analyzed the data. I forget the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody analyzed the data and they found that there is a hot spot in some place in UK, right? Like a lot of activities happening from Fitbit, and it was from Fitbit data.
Okay.
What they found out that was a military secret location or something, right? Now data, somebody is only analyzing people's jogging data, but what it showed you is a military establishment or whatever defense establishment that was not known to people. So after that they banned Fitbits for defense people, and
Yes.
that happened. I think even in India there was a story about some uh, phone. I forget, it was some device from China. I forget the name of the
Yes.
model
Yes. There
now.
was an incident.
Right. So data never lies.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
Looking at the data is what you're looking at as a data scientist. So you might get challenged, but you have to work with what the data story comes from the data.
Right, sir. And I also remember you mentioning during our last conversation that data in the oil and gas industry should be seen as a crucial business paradigm.
Yeah.
And Exactly, that is what you have helped us understand. Now, sir, moving on, you are recognized as the first chief data scientist in the industry. What does this recognition mean to you?
I I I have no idea how that came about, so I can't really say anything. Of course, it's a good. I look at it as a certainly useful in terms of when we talk to our customers, our partners, because we've been that has enabled us to lead the space, especially as a oil field services company, right?
Right.
We help our partners to increase their value, and so they look up to us as to what we are doing, and the team, the center being the first big data and data science center of excellence, that has certainly helped us significantly. And of course, we are always talking in terms of economic impact that we help generate, and so always to be on the leading edge is a great idea. All of us like to do that, right?
Yes, sir, definitely. But yes, I congratulate you for that, and you are somebody whom the industry looks up to whenever there is a conversation around big data and digital disruption. You are definitely the person who leads the way. And now, sir, talking about the present times, these are very, very unprecedented times for the oil and gas industry. What do you think about the potential impact on big data consumption in the market today?
So remember, one is that big data term I use not very loosely, right? The way I call big data is like all the data. So small data, big data, large data, right? So everything is part of it. All data should be the answer, right?
Mhm.
Because say if we look at in the drilling side, we might generate only very few gigabytes of data. In some areas, we could be generating multi terabytes of data in a single day,
Right.
right? So if you look at oil and gas going from, if we look from upstream to downstream and in between midstream, the data sizes don't matter because they are so varied,
Mm-hmm.
and the dimensionality of it is complex, right? Type of data which people didn't think few years back. Now we can actually generate more video streams if we want to, uh, and we can generate vibrational audio data,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you think of it, there's a lot more variety also there. So one should look at how do we maximize the value from all different kinds of data
Mm-hmm.
by connecting them, and the term I use is data pipelining, right? Because we can't really copy the data, keep it in in a one data warehouse, then another data warehouse, and put them together into a big cloud and things like that. Value generation is the key part,
Mm-hmm.
and goal for the industry should be to um, to actually make that data as smart as possible, so
Mm-hmm.
you can do real time resource optimization, right? And this is it is not a one time thing, it is a continuous thing, because if you look at the oil well life cycle, it's very complex.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple steps are there, number of workflows are significant. We can only touch one at a time, so to say, and
Right.
then build them together, right? Nobody has been able to do for any business a complete overhaul in terms of leveraging data,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of course, there are some data native companies which start only with data. Those are different,
Right.
right? That's because they have nothing else, so to say,
Mm-hmm.
right? Here we are talking about real physical aspects of the problem, right? So you have to build a system so that you can eventually look at a value from this thing, and it's a uh, unprecedented times. Sometimes other times were always unprecedented, right? We don't know what's tomorrow, right? Even in a normal day to day. So
Yes.
unprecedented time is always there, but degree of that predictability is different, right?
Right.
Uh, um, and certainly with the oil and gas industry, for various reasons, as we all know, in the public domain, is having its own challenges and an opportunity to transform itself.
Absolutely, sir. And sir, how do you see, in terms of operations, workforce, and technology, how do you see these times changing the industry? How do you see the industry evolving?
So what we have seen is we have seen an increase request for the digital support
Mm-hmm.
across around the world, so to say.
Right.
Uh, and when I say digital, there are multiple aspects to it, whether it's the cloud technology, whether it's the data science part of it, just the simple data and information side of it, and as you know, like since you are in India and you are working from home, and pretty much everybody is working from home in some sense.
Yes.
Um, Even countries like Middle East, big oil companies, they have gone to work from home. So that has changed the way you use the tools and technologies, right?
Right.
Uh, Earlier, people would not be actually doing a Teams conference even if they wanted to. Right? It probably wouldn't be allowed across,
Yes.
especially across the organizations, right? But today they have all come together and saying whichever platform will work for a meeting, people have actually allowed, and especially in oil and gas industry, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, the Skype or the whatever the Microsoft tools or any other, you were not allowed to, so to say, use open source technologies, so to say, right?
Yes.
But now people have adjusted to that, right? So everybody went and put Microsoft Teams, and their cross cross company connections is seamless, so to say. Um, Access to VPN and non-VPN platforms have been uh, allowed, so right.
Right.
Uh, and the advantage that we see, at least, um, overall, like it's not just Halliburton, but in general, from oil and gas executives that I talk to, the productivity has suddenly increased. And I think you are in Gurgaon or someplace, right?
Yes. Yes. Good.
But think of people who are in Bangalore, and they take like 2.5 hours to go to office,
Travel.
and
Yes.
another 2.5 hours to come back. That's like 5 hours of their life,
Yes.
right?
Definitely.
So, and you are supposed to work 8 hours, right? So you see that 5 hours that you got tired, now you can put in work. And people, the challenge is like, how do you get a break from sitting in front of your computer and all the calls that you're doing? So there are these things have to be more looked at. But I think the productivity has increased,
Definitely.
and it will continue to be like that. Adoption of digital technologies is actually increasing the pace, and I can certainly say firsthand, from 2014 to now 2020, in 6 years. If I were to draw a graph, I can really say 2014, 15 people said no, nothing can happen, right? 2016 people started. It's like the hockey stick. If you know how entrepreneurship teach you hockey stick.
Yes.
So we are in that. We are like just crossing that hockey stick thing, and people are now going, okay, let's do something. So which is, I think, a great achievement from that point of view.
Yes, sir. And sir, how are you looking at the role of big data in dealing with a crisis like this, even in the times to come?
No, I personally, I think it is irrespective of the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Absolutely.
okay, this happens to be a crisis for various reasons, but as a business, and especially in the era of Industry 4.0, one has to continuously look at leveraging their data, right? And the more you connect, the more you synchronize, the more data you generate, you get always more insights, so that you can actually improve your business. The goal is to improve your business, right? Irrespective of what business you are in.
Mm-hmm.
So this crisis should be like an eye opener that we need to accelerate the pace of generating the value. But otherwise, data always plays the role, uh, has been playing a role, but we just haven't actually tapped into it at the right time.
Yes, yes, sir. And sir, this brings me to my next question. I'm just curious. Now, amidst all of this, how are you looking at data sharing in the industry?
So that's a very big question, right? What I would break down this problem in multiple ways,
Mhm.
right? Because it's a generic term people use, and then there is a lot of confusion about it.
Yes, yes, definitely.
What does data sharing really is, in what context, right?
Mhm.
If we are talking about an enterprise within a business, that data sharing is very different
Yes.
than data sharing at a industry level, then sharing data at a country level, then sharing globally, right? So I'm not going to comment on any of those things because they are different regulations, things like that.
Mhm.
I want to focus that if you want to generate value for your business,
Mhm.
then with the right governance framework, the right implementation of big data technologies, one can actually share the data within their unit and within their organization to create value
Mhm.
much more safely,
Right.
right? Rather than locking it down, because there are technologies which have already existed for a long time.
Mhm.
If you are not supposed to touch some database, then you should not be touching it, and it
Yes.
can be alerted in real time,
Right.
right? So within an organization, the first step is to figure out the best governance and technology solution
Mhm.
within the organization, and
Mhm.
that itself will be a significant value for a business,
Right.
right? Not everybody needs to know every data, right? First of all,
Yes.
that we know, but the data, when it comes to operational efficiency and all, those could be connected and it actually generates more value. But when we talk about global and country level, that's a very complex. There are bigger players into it, and I probably
Mhm.
not want to comment on it.
Yes, yes, definitely, sir. So now, what do you think when we get through all of this, when we get through these tough times that we have before us, how do you see the role of digital in the oil and gas industry evolving?
I think it will play a very significant role, right? And for last couple of years, you've heard about energy transition,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so oil and gas industry is a player in it,
Right,
right?
right.
How significant of a player it will be, it depends on how we leverage our assets,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the assets is digital or data,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And so it's going forward, depending on which part of the world you are in, uh, how fast you leverage your assets, uh, how efficiently you leverage those assets. You will know what percentage of player are you in the whole energy transition landscape, right?
yes,
And so one should look at not the short term, but should look at where am I in the bigger ecosystem. So
yes.
it's a very complex ecosystem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Many people will say energy means solar energy, wind energy, oil and gas, fossil fuel, but there are other things happening, right? Fusion is there, geothermal is there, so it depends, and sustainability questions are there. So digital certainly has a big role in it.
Absolutely, sir. So now I would particularly want to know what is your message for the startups in the Indian community, especially because they are going through a very tough time. Some of the businesses were about to pick up, and things changed dramatically with what is happening in the world right now. What would you tell them?
So having done some startups in the past, and still associated as a past president of Thai, DC chapter,
Yes.
and it's a always there have been ups and downs in this ecosystem, right? The best way that I see is that money will dry up in the startup ecosystem for short time, but these startups, if they have a solution and they can combine a solution with other startups, right, to provide a more comprehensive solution to a problem
Hmm.
that can save, you know that can save them.
Right.
It's in business term we call it cushioning,
Hmm.
or in the stock market people call it diversification, right?
Right. Right.
right? So you may have an RPA solution, but somebody might have a image analysis solution. Come together to provide a solution to some bigger company or bigger organization that we can do end to end or whatever the bigger scope of it. And but that requires people to talk to each other, especially um, startup people are always busy with their part of the problem and the products and their services, but that ecosystem is needed to come together, and that helps a lot actually. So questioning yourself with the right diversification is the key part.
Absolutely, sir. So now you have had such an eventful journey in the industry. Tell us, how do you look back on your journey and what are the new milestones you are looking forward to?
That's a tough question. You don't who knows about the milestones, right? If somebody says they know, then that we have a challenge, right? You can only see so far in any of these things, right? No, I think for my 6 years in oil and gas industry has been wonderful. I have I've thoroughly enjoyed my stay, and I'm still enjoying it. And certainly, I have some bigger things to do, uh, and you probably hear them sooner or later,
Yes.
right? But I think it's best thing is any industry for that matter. When I work for AOL or other industries, if you should enjoy what you're doing, right? It's not as I said, in AOL I went just from an individual contributor to almost reporting to the CTO and SVP in 7 years is not an easy task,
Yes,
right?
definitely.
But at the same time, I enjoyed and had fun, and that's what I do here. I have great people to work with uh, globally, right? I've certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, I have made my uh, some of them I can certainly call friends also now in the oil and gas industry at a very senior level, right? Uh, and interaction with them have been really, really positive. And so I just don't know how far can I go, right? It's an infinite reach problem, right? The horizon is far away.
Yes,
It
yes.
looks closer, but as you move forward, you will reach there.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your story about the industry, sir, and also for touching upon some very, very crucial aspects when we talk about digital and big data in the oil and gas industry. It has been absolute pleasure connecting with you today and speaking about these things. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, sir.
Thank you, Garima. Anytime.